Conflict happens in all marriages, but in a lot of marriages, it's not handled effectively. This year, learn to break your conflict cycles with the right tools and strategies for your marriage. To get conflict coaching for your marriage, go to oneextraordinarymarriage.com/conflict coaching.
From Naples, Florida, this is the One Extraordinary Marriage Show, where being busy is overdone, romancing is fun, and scheduling sex has taken the guesswork out of wondering when you're going to get some. I'm Tony DeLorenzo, your co-host, along with my beautiful wife, Elisa. From coast to coast and around the world, thank you for joining us. It's time to talk sex, love, and commitment. Give us a call or text us on the HUG hotline at 858-876-5663, or send us an email to hugs@oneextraordinarymarriage.com. In today's episode, we're addressing a situation that a lot of couples find themselves dealing with, living like roommates.
There's a quote from Maggie Reyes that says this about roommates. If you are not connecting with your spouse on a daily basis, you are exchanging your soulmate for a roommate. Yeah, just let that sit for just a little sec there, because that one can get a little bit under the skin. And we're going to be talking about that whole living like roommates in today's episode. But we start every episode here at One Extraordinary Marriage with a hug. And the reason that we do this is that we want to celebrate what you're doing, the transformations that you're experiencing, the change that you're creating in your own marriage. And this hug comes from a 5-star iTunes review.
That would probably be an Apple podcast review now.
I still call it iTunes.
I know.
I know. Okay. 5-star Apple, to make Tony happy, 5-star Apple podcast review that we received that started with, "This framework works. This podcast clarified my mind and transformed my marriage. There is no one thing that makes an extraordinary marriage. There are many different facets that blend into something extraordinary. The extensive collection of episodes provide real-life examples of building all the pillars of intimacy and provide a lot of examples of the fallout from crumbling intimacy. Before One Extraordinary Marriage, I had my intimacy priorities and she had hers. But we never found room to work on both together until we had the 6 pillars from One Extraordinary Marriage. This podcast normalizes the conversations that could make our marriage work. Then it showed us how to have the conversations ourselves. Now we have the one extraordinary marriage we were seeking for 37 years.
Wow.
I wish we had had this advice when we were young."
Well, you're still young, so let's make it happen now. That's awesome. I love it. And I also just want to say, hey, we're starting off the new year, and I want to welcome any of our new listeners. Maybe somebody shared this with you at the end of last year, and maybe you found this because you're like, I need something for my marriage, and I want to welcome you here to the One Extraordinary Marriage Show and to the One family as a whole. Let's kick this thing off.
Absolutely.
Let's have an amazing year. Let's have an extraordinary year.
Absolutely. And, as we're jumping into today's episode, it's easy to think at the end of the year, you just start thinking about cycles and, what are the cycles and what are the seasons that we've been in and things like that. And the truth of the matter is that marriage has a lot of cycles. You might have your newlywed cycle, raising children, building careers, the empty nester, retirement. But there's one little cycle that doesn't necessarily get a lot of attention. And it's one that can cause a lot of grief and heartache. And that's this roommate cycle. And Merriam-Webster.com defines a roommate as simply someone who shares the same room or living quarters. And a few of you listening to this episode just thought to yourselves, that's us. Because there are a lot of marriages that fall under this definition where the romance is gone. Life is about logistics. The connection that you used to have as husband and wife has fallen away. And it seems like all the two of you do is share a room or the same living quarters.
And we understand this, obviously. We've been married 28 years as of this recording. And I would have to say that Elise and I have been there. But I want to also say, prior to getting married, there were times when we were in college, we had roommates. And we, if you look at that definition, it's simply someone shares the same room or living quarters. And even when you read that to me, I was like, yeah, I remember that in college. Sophomore year, we had a house, 4 bedrooms. There's 5 guys in it. We shared the same living quarter. I shared the master bedroom with one guy. I shared the same living space with him. We were roommates. And I've known that there have been times where I've sat in our own home in the last 28 years and different homes that we've had and where we've lived that it's felt like that as well.
Absolutely. We're in the same space. And, a lot of people talk about, well, it just kind of happened. Like we just became roommates. And what I want to say is, yeah, maybe you quote unquote fell into it. But the whole reason that we're doing this particular episode is because you can choose to get out of it. I loved that quote that we opened the episode with, that if you aren't connecting daily with your spouse, you're exchanging your soulmate for your roommate. Because connection in any of the 6 pillars of intimacy is a daily choice. It's about being intentional and taking action. And I love, Tony, that you mentioned that we are first recording this as of the beginning of a brand new year. And what better time to actually start to think about, like, where am I going as an individual in a marriage? Where am I going to be intentional and take action in my marriage today? Not even like this year. Like, I don't even want you to think about 365 days.
Yeah.
I want you to come back to, if we are living like roommates, what can I do today to start to make a difference? Because like Tony said, we've had our roommate seasons. We had them, prior to doing, 2008-ish, prior to doing the 60-day sex challenge. But I would even say, in the last 5 years, which interestingly enough, it hit me like that was also pandemic and, kids in high school and all of this kind of stuff, but just more logistics, more logistics than love, more rote than romance, right? Just doing these things where it was like, okay, yeah, like we're just handling logistics, yeah, we're sort of spending time together, but not really. It was the whole separate couch thing. I mean, any of you, I know we've been talking about the apathy episode, it's come up a lot, but I think it really does fit again, the one from a year ago where it was just kind of like you get apathetic and about the relationship, and you can find yourself in this place where you're like, yeah, like we exist.
And it still happens at times. I think over the years, there have become many distractions for us. Working together creates a whole nother dynamic. Us moving here to Florida and learning our new way, even over the last 5 months that we've been here, I think there are times when we can find ourselves in this place. And so many a times when we're doing these episodes, do realize and understand that sometimes we're just talking to us and having the conversation to go, okay, what are we going to do? Because Elisa said something I think that's very important to hear and understand. We're at the start of a new year. And so many of us will look at like, well, what's going to happen by the end of the year?
I literally just saw that one of the Facebook groups I'm in, or Instagram DM I got. What do you want your life to look like at the end of 2025? And I'm like, I don't even know what it's going to look like tomorrow.
Right. And a lot of times if you come to a live event, you see us and we're talking about the 6 pillars of intimacy, and we've said it here. What can you do over the next 30 days? And so if you feel like you're caught in this roommate cycle and this roommate syndrome, and you're just sort of like, we're just going through this, what can I do right now to start making a change?
Absolutely. And it's not just us that evaluate if we're in this place or are we currently in this place. Last week on Instagram stories, we asked the question, as the new year is approaching, do you currently feel like the two of you are living more like roommates than husband and wife? And I'm here to share that 54% of the one family said they do feel more like roommates here at the start of the year. And then we asked the question, because you can't just ask a question like that without asking a follow-up question that says, well, what do you think has gotten you to this place? Because, that shift to a roommate syndrome is that shift from having that like loving relationship where it starts to move into this place where it just feels more like a living arrangement, right? Going back to that sharing a room or sharing living quarters. And there were so many different responses. You guys really, you shared your heart with us, and we heard things like not putting enough effort into us as a couple.
Not being intentional. Yeah.
Tiredness, fatigue. It's a big thing. It doesn't matter how old your kids are or what's going on in your life. There are a lot of tired people out there. Menopause, perimenopause kept coming up. I know it. I live it. We are living it. It is a thing. Children. We've got everything from 1-year-old twins and on up, new babies, that type of thing that are all causing this disconnect. Complacency. Communication breakdown. My spouse believes vulnerability is weakness. Lack of initiation in most pillars. We don't spend time together. Our responsibilities. consistent rejection. We're overscheduled. Our phones, struggles in the bedroom, secrets. My spouse lost their job, lack of desire, focus on the kids. Like, you all probably heard yourselves in some of those responses, or as I was sharing them, you thought, oh, but Elisa, this is happening in our marriage. It didn't make the list, but this is why we're in this space of living like, and you guys know, like when I give a list, it's not exhaustive. I mean, there are, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people in the one family. So we're not going to just give you a full list of every single possibility. But
I want to ask you something though. When we think about when we've been in this area, what has it been for us? Like, what would your response be for us going from living like lovers to now living like roommates?
I think in different seasons, it's definitely been the kids. I am the first to admit that I've had seasons where I wholeheartedly put my kids before the marriage. We have definitely had seasons. And I think more recently, like when I think about more recent, I do think our schedule really contributed to it the last few years. When we were in San Diego, I think there was just a lot of things going on. And so we were having fun and we were doing things, quote unquote, together, but often with other people and not so much like, what are Tony and Elisa doing? I think that has been a big thing. I think there are just times when we don't, and I won't even say we. You're asking for my response. I know as much as I talk to people all day long, because I'm coaching, especially on my coaching days, I know my communication breaks down when I come out of my office and I'm like, I don't want to talk. So I am very aware of that. And even, I'll share with it a little later in the episode, just some of the things that I'm planning on for this year. What would you say?
I would say busyness, other activities pulling us away or myself away. I think about the time when there are deeper issues in the marriage, and yet cycling or working out or something would create this roommate syndrome because it was easier to go do that and not engage.
Sure.
And so for me, when I think of roommate syndrome, it's a lack of engagement with you. It's some spot or place. It could be from emotional intimacy to physical intimacy all the way to sexual intimacy. So I think that's when I sort of look at when we've been there, or if we're sort of starting to teeter on that spot, even now, because it still happens, folks. Like, we do this all the time, but you get it. Like, things happen in life. Stress happens. There are things that are hitting you from different places. And for me, it's the lack of engagement on my part to engage with you in any of our pillars of intimacy. And some of it was true. It's like, hey, well, there's still some times where I just feel like, if I bring this up, is Elisa going to reject me on it? Because I have brought things up in the past and it's sort of like, well, why are we going to do that? Or like, it's just more work or something. And I'm more the adventurous type than Elisa is. And so there is still that tension that is felt.
It's why he got the Travel Florida book for Christmas.
That's
folks.
why I got it.
It's why he got it. And in all honesty, that was an action on my part. That was a very deliberate action on my part to break out of a cycle. Because if there's one thing I can tell you, like, today is a new day.
That's right.
You're listening to this podcast. You get to make the choice. Not only have you chosen to listen to the podcast today, but you get to make a choice on what you're going to do, how you're going to show up. And a lot of times we talk about what's in the 6 pillars of intimacy, the secret to an extraordinary marriage in the book. But one of the things I said in that book that comes up in so many coaching sessions, comes up in conversations, is that the first person to look at when you're saying what needs to change in our marriage is the one that stares back at you in the mirror when you're brushing your teeth. And you ask that person, what can I do to break this cycle, to change things, to create a different thing? And we're going to be talking about that after this break.
Welcome to Nada Yada Island.
Next on Nada Yada Island.
I knew I deserved so much more, so I left. I finally switched to Metro and got what I was looking for.
Get one line for only $25 a month with AutoPay. Just bring your phone to Metro and experience all the data you want on the largest 5G network. That's Nada Yada Yada, only at Metro by T-Mobile.
First month is $30. Bring your number and ID. Offer not available if with T-Mobile or with Metro in the past 180 days.
We're back. And we're addressing the destructive nature of living like roommates or being stuck in that place called roommate syndrome. And
can I say one thing, though, real quick? Before the break, you said, look at that person in the mirror.
Yeah.
And it always brings me back to an amazing Michael Jackson song, Man in the Mirror.
I even think I quoted that in the book.
Okay.
I might have.
I'm going to put a link here to it, and it's going to be on YouTube, and watch it and listen to the words, because what Michael Jackson sings in that, and I grew up in the Michael Jackson era, and I thought he was okay. But as I gotten older, I've realized that man, the words he spoke, especially in this song, can move you. And are you willing to do it? And there are times when I'll jump in my car, and as Elisa is saying, like, I need to look at myself. And I will literally get in the car doing errands or whatever, and I'll play that. I'll just open up, Apple Music and be like, Man in the Mirror. And like, here we go. Like, I need to listen to this, and I need to hear it. And so for you today, it might be the time to just listen to something, because I know for myself, music stirs me. It gets me to a place where I go, I need a shift. I need to make a change. There's something that needs to happen here. And maybe that is what you need right now, is you need to hear something that wells up some emotion, like some fight in you for your marriage, like a little bit of like, I need to go after this again. I need to step into this again, because I do sometimes. 28 years of marriage, like sometimes I still need to stand up and go like, I need to fight for this marriage. I need to fight for my wife. And maybe that will be for you. So I'm going to put a link here for Man in the Mirror. It is one of my all-time favorite songs.
Well, it becomes that anthem. And I'm thinking of the lyrics as you're saying that. I'm looking at the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to make a change. Mm-hmm. Right? And I'm not going to sing. You guys know I have a great speaking voice. The singing voice is...
You sing wonderfully.
I'm not going to. We're just going to state the fact that the line says, I'm asking him to make a change. Mm-hmm. And I think that line is so important, because nothing changes in a marriage until the actions in the marriage change. Right? You have to do something different in order to get different results. And the last question we asked on the Instagram stories as we were talking and prepping for this episode is, what are the ways that you've tried to reconnect? Because this isn't just like Tony and Lisa telling you what to do. This is like, what are your peers? What have others in the one family done or tried or attempted? And it's everything from date nights to adult only trips, counseling, therapy, coaching, books, podcasts. Y'all are listening here. This is probably one of the things you've tried. Sitting next to each other on the couch. That's one of my go-tos. Like I work hard to be in proximity. So our living room here is a little different. We don't have a sectional. So we like sit next to each other on chairs, or we sit next to each other like a couch next to a chair. Turn off the phones. Good gravy. That is a big one. As we head into,
even for us,
it is a big one.
This is a big one.
Do activities together. Have your Saturday morning coffee dates. Go to bed at the same time. Naked time without expectations for more. I love that one. And then I was just putting the finishing polish on the notes for this episode when I got an email. And I want to share this very specifically with all of you, because this was a gentleman that had reached out prior to Christmas, had responded to a question that we have. Hey, what's the one thing you want to focus on in the next 30 days? And he talked about wanting to get closer to his wife. And I just, responded back. I'm like, hey, what are you trying? And he came back with this after Christmas. And he said, my wife gave me a late Christmas present, a scheduling journal with pockets each month. Each pocket has a $100 bill to be invested in our relationship to help us be closer, better, and not so lost and broken. Talk about taking action, making a change, doing something intentional.
I love that in so many ways. One is that I like the ability to be like, here's $100. It's in an envelope, or it's in this deal. Like, you can write down ideas. Like you can start thinking like ahead, like, okay, right now it's winter time. Like for us, it's not really winter, but it's going to be cold here in the next week. So, what you would do and what you would be thinking about for like June, July, and August, you can be writing down like, okay, like, oh, we could go do this or whatever it may be. Or as the spring comes, like we're going to go do this because we're going to get out of the house because we've been holed up in here. And, for you Northerners, we don't
now that we're in Southwest Florida,
we don't get holed up too often here in Southwest Florida, but it's just I really do think that it's really it's just a cool innovative way to think outside the box to break and shake up that complacency and that roommate syndrome.
So I told you I was going to share a little bit more about what I'm doing, and coming out of just a little bit earlier in this episode. And it's actually funny because our daughter had walked into my office yesterday, and I'm working on prepping some materials for Menopause Shouldn't Suck, and one of them is a tracker. And I'm just trying different trackers, like what do I like and what do I want to use and what do I want to share with the wives in Menopause Shouldn't Suck. And so Abby is sitting in my office, and she starts looking at this tracker, and she's like, "You have kiss on here. What, like you have to write yourself a note to kiss Dad?" Tony hasn't seen this. He has no idea this is even coming in the conversation.
But this is something that, yes, you do need to do.
Right. And so she starts laughing hysterically, as only a 19-year-old will, when she's looking at her mom's like goals and what she's focused on. And she didn't actually get past it. She's like, "Do you also have sex on here?" I'm like, "No, that one I don't have to schedule. We're good there."
But we've been scheduling it.
We have, but that's been like I don't have to put that on my monthly schedule. But what she didn't get into is that it also has conversation cards a couple times a week on there. And actually, it's right behind you, the wheel on
this one right
here. Yeah, that right there. So I've got some health things that are on here that I'm working on, but I also had conversation cards. So kiss daily, and like a real kiss, not like a little pet kiss. Conversation cards 2 times a week. Prayer 3 times a week, and phone down at 9 p.m. daily.
9 p.m. We're already in bed.
We're not in bed at 9 p.m.
We definitely are. Right now we're not because the kiddos are around more and it's been the holidays.
Okay,
but most days I would say we are in bed by like 9:30. So if you're saying put the phone down by 9 p.m., that doesn't do us any good because you get into bed and you pick up your Kindle.
But I'm reading. Okay. This is my So let's refocus, Tony.
Refocus.
Can we go back to the kiss thing?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. All right. So like January 1st, I don't know if you noticed, but I walked up to you when you were sitting at the table, and I gave you like a really big, like prolonged kiss.
I did.
Are you sure? Or are you just
No, I did. I'm like, why is she doing this in my head?
Right. Because I didn't tell him, and that's okay. That's okay. But like I have this tracker, and yes, my daughter thinks it's hysterical that I have to put kissing on a tracker for me with her dad after 28 years. She thinks it's hysterical. I'm good with it. I'm good with the fact that I didn't tell Tony until we're recording this episode, and he had to find out at the same time y'all are finding out about it, because sometimes we just start doing things to make a difference in our marriage. We start taking actions, and maybe we have to have them on a tracker, and maybe we have to look at something every day because it's been 28 years and you're like, no, I just need the discipline to do it. And I'm okay with it because where you take action, you change your marriage. Right. And I know that there are some of you right now listening to this episode and they're like, but Elisa and Tony, I've tried all this. And my spouse doesn't engage or doesn't care or doesn't want things to change or doesn't think anything wrong or doesn't, is content with the status quo. And I want you to know we hear you. That isn't a surprise to us that there are those of you out there listening to this episode today going, but that's us. Because I've worked with hundreds of people over the last 12, 13 years of coaching who have been in this kind of marriage. And what I would say to you is help yourself to process all the emotions that you're feeling, to process the struggles that you are having with trying to make a change in your marriage. Don't just keep waiting. Even if your spouse doesn't want to get help, you go do it. You get help for yourself. And I know the spouse that doesn't want to engage is likely not listening to this podcast. I get it. This probably isn't the kind of podcast you're not going to pick up a One Extraordinary Marriage podcast, and then you're definitely not going to go find the Living as Roommates if you're not currently engaged. Right. It would be highly unlikely. But if you were the one listening, here's what I would say to you. And I would tell you that your spouse can only handle your non-engagement for so long. Nobody gets married thinking that it's going to be soulmate for 30 years and then it shifts into this roommate place and we're just going to stay in this roommate thing forever and ever. They got married to you to be your spouse with all that entails, both the emotional and the sexual intimacy and all the other pillars of intimacy. And I want to say to you that if there are hurts that you need to process and heal from, like, go get help to do that. And if there are things that need to be said, get help to say them, right? The way the two of you are living isn't doing favors for anybody. It's actually perpetuating the cycle. It's not the way God intended you to live. And it's not the example that you want to be for your family, for your kids, for your community. It's time to do something to address what's been going on so that this year looks different than last year, right? So that you don't keep doing the same things and going, gosh, when are we going to get a different result? But you say, you know what? Here's where we've been. If I want a different result, I've got to take different actions. And this is going to be the year that I'm going to take different actions so that we get that different result.
Yeah, it's time. And I do want to say this. We are working hard to put together some new things for you guys because we've heard from you, we hear you, and we're going to do it for you and for us because we all want to have extraordinary marriages. And so step in this week. Think about this. Truthfully, 54%. And I'm sure there's many more who are still just sort of sitting on the sidelines. And once they hear this, they're going to probably go, no, we're not. And they're going to go, oh, yeah, maybe we are. And so if that's you this week, it's time to shake things up. It's time to do something like Elisa has done. It's time to do something like that email we received where it's just putting $100 or $20 in an envelope and go, here it is for 12 months. Let's make some memories. Let's shake things up. What is the little daily connection you could do each day to show your spouse you love them? And it makes me think as well. So this week, go out there and do that. We're going to be pressing in. We're going to be praying for you. This is a year, I believe, of prayer in the One Family, of stepping in and seeing you guys grow in miraculous ways that none of us could even imagine. So let's make it happen, you guys. Take care. Have yourselves a fantastic week. We'll catch you next week. Love you guys. Thank you for listening to the One Extraordinary Marriage Show. If you love this podcast, please leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening. Your review helps others find the show and know that it's the right fit for them and their marriage.